How's it going, guys? Vitamins here. Welcome back to Black Desert. I'm your host, Kyrandis, and welcome to Tamer Succession. So today's video, more of an expansion upon just from Awakening. Some of the tricks in the previous guide video are also carried over to this skill tree, essentially. Just a few things to mention. First of all is that Succession loses a Q block. From Awakening, you lose your 2 iframes as well, and your super armor dive kick. But that's okay, because I've heard rumors and been told from other tamers that Q block is for chads, so don't worry about that. Don't be a chad, just go Succession and life will be great, apparently. Not really. So really, Succession makes the tamer actually kind of passively a bit tankier. She gets 250 HP just from a passive tree up here as well. Her E buff actually gains evasion rate, which is actually very good. Most of the skills that I use are pretty much everything here. I'll just mention that the skills I rarely use are actually all-around spinner and roaring, but these 2 skills are actually far more PvP oriented than anything. If anything, these are your 2 block skills, which is roaring and all-around spinner. But I'm gonna focus more on PvE first. I'm not really very good at PvP in general, so I'm not really gonna comment too much upon that, other than from experiences of other tamers that I've asked around. I use Flash far more often now. There's a lot of mana problems in Succession as opposed to Awakening, because of Bolt Jolt losing a lot of mana steal. So for that purpose alone, mana does become a problem again. You do have to carry mana pots. I actually have an MP absorption, MP recovery crystal on my main hand just for grinding purposes, so I swap that out with the 6 mil precision crystal every now and then. When you use absorb Heilang buff, the damage on Succession goes way out of control. It's actually like extreme. You could probably blow up like high-end mobs. Very powerful, very strong when this buff is on. So do not waste this. It still is completely wasted if your Heilang is not summoned at all, which is really stupid. I don't know why they still have that. The E buff here is the Succession E buff is quite nice because of the 15% evasion rate. I spam Throat Burn a lot to go into a Whiplash cancel. I don't actually necessarily spam Bolt Wave and Jolt Wave a lot. It's still used quite often, but I just won't spam it all the time, simply because Jolt Wave itself has a cooldown. And I've kind of measured this on mobs like over and over to test, simply because there's no damage reduction on mobs, so I don't know what the damage reduction is on PvP. But in the most case though, Jolt Wave on cooldown damage is cut by about half. So half the damage is kind of lost in that. You can spam Bolt Wave as much as you'd like. It doesn't really do anything other than that it's full damage. It's quick. You can use this to cancel stuff, just like in the previous video. But I do use Throat Burn and Whiplash a lot. Surging Tide, I use it every now and then, but I only use it off cooldown. The cooldown's quite long because it's 12 seconds. Treat this attack like a shotgun, because it really is like a point-blank shotgun. If you can land this on something in front of you off cooldown, it hits quite hard, very hard actually, especially on the back or on downed enemies. Void Lightning, don't really use this other than for the DP buff. So the buff on this is very strong, is 20 DP. You can match this with skill add-ons where All Around Spinner has also a 20 DP buff as well, so you can go up to 40 DP buff. And Roaring as well also has, I believe, a skill add-on of 20 DP buff as well, which is quite a lot. So one of the most important things I want to go over is that Lightning of Earth has a negative 20 DP debuff on this skill. You want to use this on mobs all the time, and then if the mob is actually quite tanky, you want to stack that as well with the Flash. So this is why I also use Flash all the times. Your target will end up losing basically 35 DP, which is a hell of a lot, but the all DP minus 20 is a lot stronger than the magic AP minus 15. So magic DP minus 15. So make sure to always tag like PvE mobs with this at first. I actually messed around with this in variations over and over on Histria mobs repeatedly because they can't be knocked down, so I only had to choose with back attacks and high evasion and high DR mobs. Obviously I have high damage, but then that made the HP bars very expressively easily to determine what was more effective, and I found that Lightning of Earth was more effective than Flash Pole Thrust. You can stack both of them on there, but really this one is the most important one. It's only if you lack the AP to blow up the mob fast, I would actually suggest stacking this on top of it as well. Places like Star's End is actually very good for Succession Tamer, simply because of Bolt and Jolt Wave gain down attack modifiers in Succession, whereas on main and Absolute with Awakening, they do not have down attack. So this is something to keep in mind and worth spamming on enemies that can be downed. This is only air attack in Awakening with Absolute, but in Succession, this gains down attack. So it's extremely more powerful against mobs that can be knocked down. Star's End would be the best example. I wouldn't really know about Ackman because most of the time, this kind of blasts the targets around with the knockdown, so it kind of shoots the mobs all over the place. But in places more like Star's End, for instance, they are only knocked down by the crystal, and then afterwards they're on the floor for quite a while. Whiplash is something that's spammed very often. Critical hit is very important. I would highly suggest either running, you should have critical 5. If you don't have critical 5, you're missing out on a lot of damage, where Whiplash actually supersedes Jolt Wave, in my opinion. Bolt Jolt, the Bolt Jolt combo, I'd rather have a last hit Whiplash go off with a crit, with high crit rate, than Bolt Jolt spamming all the time. Simply because this shoots a forward shockwave almost instantly, and when you couple it with Throat Burn, you're also giving yourself an evasion bonus on activation as well, which also hits just as hard, if not more, with crit. Throat Burn itself does far more damage if you have crit up. So with crit 5 and then the skill add-on of Moonlight Strike with crit rate plus 30, this is a must get because it is the highest crit rate skill on I've ever seen, and it's actually finally, like, Tamer has some really good skill add-ons, and that one is pretty much guaranteed. Like, I would recommend not picking this up, so you should pick this up. It's very strong. 30% crit rate is insane, and it's for 9 seconds on a skill that has a 4-second cooldown. So initiation on any mob should really always be spamming Moonlight Strike just for that 30% crit bonus. And then when you have critical hit rate 5, that's pretty much any skill with no crit now has a 50% crit rate on itself. So skills that have 50% inherent crit rate suddenly become 100. So things like Upward Claw shouldn't really be ignored because it hits extremely hard. I didn't really use this much at first when I first started using Succession, because I used to only use one-hit snag from pre-awakening and awakening days. So I used to only use one hit of this because it was really quick, just for chip shot damage. But now that this also gives an accuracy rate buff on top of it hitting extremely hard, it should always be used off cooldown. I wouldn't spam this either, just like Jolt Wave, just to tag the mob. And you can chunk mobs like really hard with this thing. Surging Tide against Shockwave. Void Lightning don't really use in PvE ever, because it's just slow, and it's mostly only for a plus 20 DP buff if you need to get tankier. Tamer is still really squishy. I had a 330 DP and I still got one-shotted by a witch using Voltaic Pulse, which was kind of ridiculous, but whatever. Thank God we got like some kind of DP buff, but I haven't really tested the DP buff plus the skill add-on buff to see how much tankier a Tamer actually gets with it. But with the skill add-on, you're going to have to hit something with it. So preferably if you're going to go for PvP, I would highly suggest putting the skill add-on into Roaring, because all-around Spinner's AoE is nowhere near as large as Roaring. And Trample, it may seem like it's not too much damage. This thing is actually quite strong. It took a while for me to actually learn how and when to use it. It's most of the time after it's to cancel out of like slow exits like Surging Tide. I can't really remember it off the top of my head. It was more like built into muscle memory as I was grinding over and over. It's also used. I also use it after Upward Claw simply because it's fast. Also, if you use Resonance right after Trample, it comes out extremely fast for some reason. I'm not sure why, but the animation speed seems like it's twice as fast. For some reason, I really don't know why. It just happens. So I try to always use Resonance after that. Scratch is also used a lot, so make sure you get Absolute Scratch. This is really to reposition yourself. Most of the time for repositioning, it's Trample to kind of boost yourself a little bit forward, Flash to also boost yourself forward. The real trick is actually getting into Moonlight Strike and then Lightning of Earth for that negative 20 DP, and then you kind of scratch to the side, and then you diagonally chop your enemy with a flash, and you're at their back already. And then once the mob turns around, you either like forward evasion right through it, ghost right through it, and then you scratch again to just extra damage if you want, and then you throat burn the back, and then you whiplash the back of it, and then after that you go into your bolt jolt spam, and the mob should be dead by then. And then either that, you can do another upward claw or surging tide the back, or whatever hard-hitting skill. Hard-hitting skills would pretty much be like surging tide, resonance, and upward claw, or the bolt jolt spam, or a trample throat burn whiplash if you have high crit or crit buffs going. Lightning of Earth, I wouldn't spam this too much because it's only for the DP debuff, and the attack is kind of slow, so I wouldn't really spam that. All around spinner is not actually that powerful, as much as the digits sort of look like it, and the Awakening days it was really powerful in Awakening. But in Succession, it's not really that strong. It feels kind of weak. It's only the last hit that hits really hard, or at least chunks at least a decent amount. But this is more of a block skill. I would use it against mobs that CC a lot, or either that you just forget your combo and you just press the button and kind of give yourself 2 seconds of like thinking time. So that's what I use that for. And that's pretty much it. Fearful Trembling I still use every now and then just for super armor and for 360 AoE hit. I don't have any skill add-on on it, unfortunately, because it's far too slow, and the cooldown's too long when the add-ons on some of the skills in PvE for Succession is much better, especially the Moonlight Strike. That's just way too good to give up. I would not give this up because that crit rate is just intense. Other skill add-ons I have, I'm mostly just spec'd for PvE right now. I have attack against monsters plus 25 on the Lightning of Earth, simply because I use this to start off on every hit and every engage on a mob. Instantly recover 6 MP per hit is not really useful, because even though you have a lot of mana problems, like you only use this maybe like 1 hit, so it's not spammed often enough to regenerate, but it does soften the blow to the mana consumption. Probably put that more towards Jolt Wave or something like that. I have it on Jolt Wave anyways, but it's still not enough even with that 3 MP per hit. Trust me, it just drains like nothing. And Bolt Wave, I have evasion accuracy as always, because the boost in those stats are very nice, especially when Tamer now has a throat burn evasion bonus on activation that stacks with this if you hit something with Bolt Wave. Heilong's aura is also 15% evasion rate. And then the other thing is the weird operations of Heilong. You can sort of launch Heilong now with Bolt Wave, but I don't really know how to target it. I just know that sometimes he actually teleports into the target like that. I don't exactly know how to activate that. Using Roaring is a giant forward guard, and it also causes Heilong to roar. When he's roaring, that causes a stiffness around him. Q Void Lightning, very useful as usual. Giant stiffness area, most of the time used to catch people. I will put more skill add-ons for PvP to lower attack speed or move speed as well, along with the roaring. And then in terms of engagements, you should be able to engage, like the Moonlight Strike almost doubled its distance in Succession. So Awakening Moonlight Strike is kind of short distance, but like with Succession, Moonlight Strike can hit almost that soldier like by the tree over there from way back here, so it goes really far. You can boost yourself even further if you have more move speed, but it's really far. And then if you can snipe somebody, which is really hard, this isn't easy by the way, your only protection at engaging is super armor here, and then Lightning of Earth, third hit, would be a knockdown. In Succession, you actually have 2 knockdowns now if you picked up the Rabam skill of Legendary Beast Claw. Also very useful, but Lightning of Earth is a knockdown on the 3rd hit, and the 3rd hit can be cancelled immediately with the WW evasion straight into it. So once you land on the floor, you can just go straight into the 3rd hit, or either that, after a Moonlight Strike, you can go into the 3rd hit. As long as it's not on cooldown. If it's on cooldown, that knockdown isn't going to happen, so just be wary of that as well. And then in terms of cancels, it was a bit of a mind mess. Like, I actually have this, there's actually more finger pain from playing Succession than I did with Awakening, and it took a while to get used to Succession from Awakening, so in terms of PvP standpoint, I would definitely say Succession is not as good as Awakening for PvP. Simply because you lose the 2 iframes is the biggest thing, and the Q block for Chads is non-existent in Succession, so imagine losing to a Succession Tamer that has no Q block, unfortunately. And that's pretty much it. In terms of the burst though, if you're able to grab somebody like just from a launch from here, then I'm pretty sure they're gonna be dead in any case. But yeah, a grab combo should destroy somebody just because of how much more powerful Upward Claw is. And if you able to tag them with Moonlightstrike just on the get-go, that's gonna have like about an 80% crit, and you'll probably nuke somebody really hard with that. So the damage is quite high for Succession. Almost anybody I've grabbed, and assuming the grab doesn't bug out and they become invisible and get a magic iframe because Tamer's grab is really glitchy, you can blow somebody up pretty quick with a grab. It's just about as strong as Awakening. Unfortunately though, like some of her protections are not as appropriate as they are in Awakening. Other than that though, I don't really have too much else to go about Succession other than that it seems a lot better for PvE. It's got a lot more AoE, and the cancels are quite more intense as the circulation of skills is quite a bit more. So it is kind of rough on the hands if you want the top damage output for what it feels like for me. I don't actually spam Bolt Jolt all the time because I noticed that I actually kill mobs slower that way. Whereas using Trample and Throat Burn and Whiplash repeatedly when they're on cooldown and rotation with Bolt and Jolt, it was a lot stronger doing it in that fashion with a Upward Claw single hit every now and then. So most of the time it was just kind of like dash into a mob and then blow them up like that, and then just like this, and then one hit, and then like that. So that's about 6 skills right there. It's a bit weird on the input. I used 1 hit of the Upper Claw there. I don't think people might have even seen that, but my accuracy did go up. So you get an accuracy buff when you use that, which is why I use it. So Tamer does have a lot of accuracy. Evasion builds should be kind of wary of a Tamer because they also have passive accuracy bonus, and then you got that accuracy bonus from Upward Claw, so missing your attacks is very unlikely, and you could probably get away with less accuracy on the character itself. Alright, so here's just some extra footage just to showcase what the heck I'm talking about. I don't really remember the combos off the top of my head, but I showed a few that I use all the time in PvE and sometimes in PvP engaging, and I'll see you guys in the next video. So thanks so much for watching, and bye bye for now. Also, I don't know how to fly with Tamer. I'm a beginner, but you can definitely fly. It's a strange bug with Tamer. You can just go into the air, kind of like Papegaing, but yeah, there's other people out there that have done it. I'm sure you can just ask them and they'll teach you how. Until then, peace. One thing I forgot to mention was that Upward Claw and Lightning of Earth can kind of be cancelled with each other. And then like the first hit can also be like cancelled with Bolt Wave for some reason. So Lightning of Earth is like, you can always just if you sort of delay the Moonlightstrike a little bit, you can go straight into that first hit just for that DP debuff. But I prefer the third hit because the third hit is it hits harder. It's 1273 x3 and it's minus 20 DP, simply because it hits harder for a little bit slower animation, which is okay. But yeah, you can mess around with Lightning of Earth quite a lot with other combos. Even with the Upward Claw, it'll take the second hit, which is also more damage, 1079 x6. It's far a lot more than 1239 x3 for Jolt Wave, especially if you got crit, and this has 50% crit on it. This has 50% crit on it. You tag something with Moonlightstrike, you're looking at 80% crit, and with critical 5, that's pretty much 100. With the Heilong buff, Whiplash is insane damage for the speed of action. So this thing will destroy a lot of stuff really quick when you have Heilong buff. I wouldn't really spam this all the time when these two other skills are off cooldown and Trample is off cooldown, but trying to get the last hit damage from the Whiplash is always good. You can get final hit Whiplash from Upward Claw, okay, and same with Lightning of Earth. It's pretty much at the end of every attack chain sequence you can finish off with a whiplash extra hit, final hit. But the fastest ones I found were throat burn in straight into that. Trample doesn't really have that, it goes straight into whiplash. So trample is more of a different cancel. And surging tide doesn't have it as well. And then in terms of the third hit for jolt wave, if you are doing the usual bolt jolt spam, the third hit is gonna lose a lot of damage and your speed is gonna lower down by quite a bit, simply because jolt wave is on cooldown. If you don't cancel it, the damage is actually about the same as a bolt jolt cancel. So I didn't really see a point in ever trying to get to the third hit. Getting to the third hit was more or less avoided because the DPS isn't as high as I'd like it to be. And if you need to actually back out of something, of a fight, and drain all your stamina, just do your back evasion with a bolt wave cancel, and you can jump back really fast and do some extreme serious side steps like One Punch Man. Okay, so you can just jump back like this, and that you should be able to get out of a situation pretty easily from that. But yeah, don't do that all the time, because only if like an emergency escape, if you really need to get out of somewhere, and then you turn around and do a tree climb quickly. All right, so we'll see you in the next video. Bye bye for now.